Resolution number 21-319 in the matter of adjourning out of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Vote.
Vote on motion 21-319. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye. With that, we're now out of executive session, and we're back into our normal meeting. And I believe we have a presentation, and Mr. Lamb, I believe you're going to do some introductions.
Commissioners, thank you. Today we have a presentation from Kenny McDonald of One Columbus. We also have in attendance here individuals from the Delaware County Finance Authority and the nonprofit One Delaware. And we are hoping to have a conversation today on economic development in the region, the county's role in that process, and how we can further enhance our partnership with One Columbus and all the great things that they are doing. They have been an amazing resource and generator of new jobs and investment within our community. Kenny has led them from the beginning and has done an amazing job of forming the relationships that have made that organization successful. And so I thank you very much for the time today to have this conversation. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Kenny McDonald.
Welcome to Delaware County.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Good morning, commissioners. I appreciate joining on a Monday morning. I got up early, got up here and actually went to the Cohatch and camped out for 3 or 4 calls this morning already. So it's good to be up here and see downtown doing great and all the construction along 23 and all the movement you have. I'll just start off with gratitude. So again, I'm Kenny McDonald, with the president and CEO of One Columbus, and our coalition of now almost 300 businesses across the 11 counties, and I think close to 39 nonprofit or governmental organizations that we have, counties, cities, even villages and townships that we kind of piece together, and of course our academic institutions. So OU and 11 other colleges and universities are part of that coalition. And our primary job is to move our economy forward and do the things that not only do, but also think and strategize about how to grow our economy. And never has that been more in peril as it has been the last year. So I will say that my attitude's improved a little bit since April of last year. And I am kind of amazed about where this region is in terms of our economic growth. So I'll just touch on a few things, and then I would love to answer some questions and things. So first of all, this region is moving forward maybe faster than it ever has before. So the amount of industrial growth in particular that we have across our 11 counties is maybe 15 to 20% more than it ever has been in my 11 years here. And that's reflected by the companies that are in our pipelines, the companies that are reaching out to us, the RFPs that we're receiving from around the world to build new facilities and think about doing business, not just in the Columbus region, but Ohio and even the U.S. And that pipeline is extremely healthy. And it looks about like it did before. 60 to 70% of the companies reaching out to us are not presently in our region. So Central Ohio remains the area of Ohio where people are asking, if I'm going to be in Ohio, I want to be in Central Ohio. And we're competing against the Nashville Metro and the Austin Metros and the Raleigh Metros. And then when we break it down to the industrial stuff, we are competing regionally with Pittsburgh and Indianapolis and Louisville and Detroit and some places in Illinois and stuff. But we're winning a lot of those battles, right? 30% of our activity is actually still from overseas. So one thing that that I thought would happen, and is playing out to be true, is that particularly the industrial sector, is that the United States is still the best place in the world to do business, and Ohio is still one of the best places in the United States to do business. And as people are able to move around the world a little bit more, they're thinking about how do they get inside the borders of our country, and the Midwestern U.S. is a really competitive place. So our team has never took its foot off the pedal in terms of recruiting new businesses for our area, and that includes internationally. This week alone, I think we have 4 or 5 meetings with European manufacturers, for example, that are considering doing business in our area. The office stuff is coming back, slowly. We are getting inquiries around office, and in some cases, some fairly large offices. So people are going to be in offices. That'll remain to be seen actually how that plays out. A footnote on that is I am concerned about the municipal income tax issue. And I do think that my concern is that it changes fundamentally, at least in our cities, how we might approach economic development and how those cities across our region might approach economic development if, in fact, 20 or 30% of those people are not going to work in that jurisdiction. And they're going to work from their basement or their garage or a home office or something, and they're not going to be in a physical tax location inside that city. So for Delaware and Marysville and Dublin and Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland and everything else, I think that's an issue that I've got my eyes on because it impacts our incentive agreements, things like that. Workforce remains the number one issue, and it's understandable that we have, a labor participation issue these days with the amount of federal stimulus that is going into the economy, and then certainly with the continuing public health concerns. There are some people that are not fully participating in the workforce. So as I go around our region, whether it's here in Delaware, anywhere, there's lots of help wanted signs. And it's a positive, and then we have lots of people hiring and moving forward, and lots of businesses are expanding. But it's troubling that we're not able to provide those companies the workers that they need as easily as we would like. And that is even on top of, lots of money going into the workforce system and a lot of good work that's going on. It's just an issue that we're going to have to continue to work through, and it's not a Columbus region issue. It's a national issue. So this is happening everywhere in the country. I can't encourage us enough to just do things that remove the obstacles of people going to work. And I'm not a housing expert. I'm not a transportation expert, but those two issues are probably the biggest issues facing our workforce and how we actually close those gaps. Finally, I will just say that the American Rescue Plan is on our mind. So the Secretary of Commerce joined us for a call that I believe some of you were on last week that we had with our investors, new U.S. Secretary of Commerce. And, I think a couple of things. One is from an economic developer standpoint, I'm thinking about how do we invest and not just spend as we approach the dollars that are going to come to our local governments and state and our schools and workforce system against some of those issues that I just mentioned, including our workforce and our infrastructure. And two, I'm very interested in collecting businesses' opinion about that American Rescue Plan and their point of view. And so we work with hundreds of businesses here. We work with hundreds of businesses around the world constantly. And so there's lots of opinions, and we're trying to aggregate those and talk to lots of businesses and understand the infrastructure and the workforce that they need in the future. And I'll end here by saying that the reason that I'm so focused on that is even prior to the pandemic, we were talking a lot about the economic transformation underway. And that every single one of the industries that we work in and we're good at, our core competencies in our region, automotive, finance and insurance, even logistics is changing radically. And technology and globalization are the two factors that are driving that. And that didn't go away, right? All of those issues that we had pre-pandemic are still absolutely in our face. And the transformation was actually accelerated by maybe 4 or 5 years in most of those industries. And so it can be a little overwhelming for us to keep up. But I'm glad we have partners like Delaware County to fight those battles and to figure it out with. And again, I'll just end with saying thank you for all of your support. And I look forward to answering questions and being part of a bigger dialogue today about the challenges and opportunities you have.
Any questions? Any questions or any observations or comments?
I have a bunch of questions. Kenny, first of all, thank you so much for coming up and getting a view of Delaware County and talking to us about so many of the good things we got going on and just what we can do going forward. Again, we really appreciate your interest, your help, and so on as we work on making Delaware County a real shining star in the region as well as for the whole state. But I mean, again, I got a whole bunch of topics I could get into, but the last one you touched on was the American Rescue Plan.
Right.
One of the components of that, as I understand it, is that the payments that the counties get, and I assume it applies to the cities too, but cannot be used for roads. It can be used for water and sewer, and I think fiber. But why not roads, and is there a way to make it applicable to roads? Because our number one challenge financially and logistically is getting investing in our roads in Delaware County. So,
Well, no expert on that, but I'm assuming that when we had the secretary on, she kind of talked about both the ARP and the infrastructure plan on its heels, that is gonna, push money towards that. And so I think when I'm, as they're talking about infrastructure, I think you're hearing them talk about broadband, you're hearing them talk about water and sewer. I almost think, in some way, this is exaggerating a little bit. We could take almost every dollar that was given to Ohio and put it towards water and sewer. We probably still wouldn't meet all the needs that we have for everything. But yeah, I think it's kind of exciting that we're going to have opportunities to sort of go after some of these dollars. It's also a huge responsibility to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is an investment, so that we can compete and not just sink money. So it's an awful lot of money. I know that's what's on our business community's mind.
okay. Let's see. One thing we're working on legislatively is what we kind of are calling an infrastructure improvement district.
Yeah.
And the approach we're taking on that is to change the TID to include other types of infrastructure, not just roads and bridges. What do you think of that? Because we've done a nice job. Chris Bosman's been on the lead, but a nice job of using the TID to get things done quicker, cheaper, and easier. So I'm interested in your thoughts on legislative initiative there.
I think it's unbelievably innovative. It's also a welcome change. 11 years ago, and I was in these quarters, and we were talking about doing things like that. That was not the tone, and it was a fast-growing county 11 years ago, right? And by the way, the counties surrounding you are fast-growing, and that only makes those issues in transportation stuff, even and infrastructure of all kinds, more important and actually more urgent. One thing I'll say is that I think it's important that we talk about transportation, broadband, almost any type of infrastructure as a workforce issue, right? So the lens that I have as an economic developer is, how do we get more people to participate in the workforce or able to participate in the workforce? And that means being able to get to and from an employment center easily. Their housing is a bit closer, right, to where those employment centers are going to be. If they have to stay home or if they have to work in a hybrid model, can they do so with advanced broadband in our state? If we can prove that we can do those things, to me, those are removing obstacles to people fully participating in the economy. And it should translate pretty directly to advancing our GDP as a region. And so when we talk about things as housing, transportation and stuff, there's always camps, right? When we talk about it as a workforce issue, I think it changes the conversation a little bit. So I just encourage us to continue to use that lens, because it changes our view of why we're making these investments, and maybe even takes it further than we already are.
Okay. Well, one more, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues. 3637, you were on the Sunbury Chamber call the other day, and we talked briefly about the second interchange being a high priority for Delaware County, and how can we advance that, whether it's through ODOT, the governor's office, the state assembly, et cetera. The Berlin Business Park is a huge economic engine for Delaware County for probably at least a couple decades, and for the region. Just if you could share your thoughts on how we could advance the second interchange, which is critical to fully developing the Berlin Business Park.
Yeah, again, I think this just unleashes not only growth, but it actually it's moving people across the county, through the county. I'm not worried about, Delaware County in the middle of that, it being sticky in terms of those people staying and living in Delaware County. It just greases the wheels of commerce. And I would encourage us, Central Ohio is powerful. It's more powerful when it goes to bat together, right? So we have all these counties that surrounding us, our cities and stuff, our business community. We, in some cases, actually need infrastructure for a different reason than the rest of Ohio. We're doing it to keep pace with growth and to open up even more opportunity. In so much of Ohio, it's still investing to ignite or be a catalyst for growth. And for us, we kind of have clogged arteries sometimes, right? And we have to go in and these are stints that open up the flow of commerce and activity across our region. So I would just encourage us to keep using these regional platforms. So when we go to the State House or we go to Washington, that we do so regionally. I think we have a lot more energy behind us when we do that.
And one thing you mentioned the other day was engaging the business community specifically in
Yeah.
that effort. I think it's a great point. We've
Yeah.
not really done a whole lot of that.
And we have a great engaged business community
Oh, yeah.
locally in small businesses, and then we're fortunate to have some really great big businesses here that are highly engaged in our region.
Commissioner Lewis?
Boy, you've touched on so many good subjects. You mentioned housing and transportation as a big concern, and I know that is true for us here in Delaware County. We've got an Affordable Housing Alliance, and because what our problem is, of course, it's a long way for people to go back and forth and still work in Delaware.
Yeah.
If they live in Columbus and they can't afford to live in Delaware County. So we've been working on a plan to really reach out and come together and work as a team. We're working too with MORPSI. And so they have a whole initiative, as you know, on affordable housing too. And housing in general too, I guess after reading National Home Builders said that we are 3 million, 3 million homes short of having enough housing especially for people starting out.
Right.
And of course that when your housing is limited, then the prices are going up, and this is, it's already happened. So any suggestions on affordable housing for us, or housing in general?
Well, I almost don't like the term affordable housing because it connotates like a federal
That's true.
program and stuff.
You're
And
right.
But I understand what you mean, which is we need workforce housing.
Workforce
we need
housing.
housing that
Right.
the people that work in our industrial parks and our business parks can afford, closer to maybe where those jobs are, so that they're spending their money locally when they leave
Yes.
and go to work.
Mhm.
And the whole country is going through this right now, in that there's a real inventory problem. I think our latest number was that our inventory is down about 48%, which it was down a lot before. And then there's things like lumber prices and stuff like that that's going to make that worse. And then other people are, because of the spike in the cost of housing, are holding on to their house.
Yes.
And that's increasing our lack of inventory as well. So I really worry about that when I think competitively about it. So if we look about it just in our region, I can get into the weeds, but if I look at, I moved from Charlotte 11 years ago. It's a very similar sized metropolitan area. They'll be building about 15,000 homes across that metro area. We'll build about less than 5,000. And we're a direct competitor of theirs. So I'm always trying to see how do we stack up when somebody comes to our area and says, how am I going to get a workforce here? Where are they going to live? And how far do they have to drive? And that's a pretty big deficit. Charlotte is not growing that much faster than we are economically, but their housing market is, and then that becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes. So we have lots of issues, most of which are policy-oriented, to work out on housing. But I think of it as a workforce problem, and it makes it more difficult for us to make the case that we're a high-growth center, when in fact we are.
Right, that's an excellent, no, you're absolutely right. Workforce housing, we'll remember that. Also, transportation, and that's something that the commissioners are concerned about, and we have an unusual breakdown in Delaware County, where most of our population is in the southern part, and, you know, people still think they're in Franklin County, some of them. And so, because they go back in and out of Columbus. And then we do have Delaware City, which we have public transportation that works there, but then we have the rural sections of our county going north. CODA has done such a terrific job with everything in Columbus and serving it, once again, the transportation needs of a workforce. And any suggestions for us on that?
We've been setting up some calls with CODA, with surrounding communities. Sometimes it's been with individual employers,
Okay.
as well as the local government entities, cities and counties and things like that, because it's a very similar problem that everybody's having, right? They may be drawing from Franklin County, or trying to move people in and out of the workforce, right? And the calls have been very fruitful in maybe two ways. First of all, CODA has a bit of a mandate to go more regional. And I think that's great. So they've got a great board that's causing them to think about things regionally. I will say that they're not going to be the solution all the time, but their participation on calls and things like that can be really valuable, because they are transportation experts and mass transit experts.
Okay.
And so it's led to some interesting conversations about how there could be local participation, maybe CODA is part of the solution, and then the private sector itself is part of the solution.
Okay.
That is saying, we'll actually help in moving our workers around. And I don't like that that's an additional burden and cost to them. I also think it's kind of a reality, and not just here, but around the country, that that's going to be something that they may have to invest in, so that they are able to move people around, at least in the, in smaller radiuses. And you have your own version of mass transit in places like Delaware County, or even
Right.
Madison County and things like that are much more rural. But those are kinds of things that we're going to have to think about as we move forward.
Okay.
And something that I think the private sector is actually very willing to have a conversation about, by the way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for coming, Kenny. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great opportunity.
Good morning. Let's talk a little bit about the transportation. We are concerned about how we're functioning in that area, and conversations are continuing. You made a comment about the private sector is willing to have that conversation. The commissioners, in a conversation we had with Dad at the time, Delaware Transportation, now several years ago, that was one of the challenges we gave them, and basically we heard back that private sector wasn't interested. So either the questions weren't being asked, or they weren't being asked properly, or in fact the private sector isn't willing to have a partnership in that regard. But just to reiterate, your feeling is they would be willing to have that conversation?
Yeah, it depends on the employer. We've even approached some in terms of having, cohort groups or coalitions, small coalitions in certain industrial parks and things like that, where they can actually invest together and things like that. It doesn't have to be every business. And again, not everybody's going to want to do it, but we're finding employers that are not only having to think about it here, but they're having to think about it in other locations around the country. And so the issue is getting, socialized a little bit in terms of, okay, this might be something that we have to do if we're going to get people to and from our facility. And they're also getting more aggressive on, a related issue is I think it's very positive that they're automating, and they're looking at things like third shift, having robots do the work and things like that. I talked about the economic transformation. That's a reality too. And that's all they're trying to do there, and what's accelerating that is, it's hard to get people to work a third shift, right? So how do we do it with, a machine instead of a person? And I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's, these are turning into really interesting conversations with the private sector because of the challenges and the opportunities they have. And I just, my final thing is maybe we can't talk to our businesses enough. They're under a lot of stress. Some are doing great, some aren't doing great. But they're just like us. It's changing rapidly, and if we don't stay in touch with them, then we're going to be out of touch in terms of serving them.
So is that a conversation down the road as we continue our evaluation, that we could sit down and have a conversation with you about your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Change the topic. Perception of Delaware County. We had an issue several years ago, which you and I have had conversations about. The perception was that we were not a friendly place to do business because of Amazon. Be upfront about it. How do you see us today and around the country and in the state? Or that perception still exist, or is it less a factor today? And if it's still a factor, how do we address it?
Well, Delaware County, as you know, one of the fastest growing. The demographics in Delaware County are phenomenal in terms of what companies are looking for. So I'll kind of start with the big picture. I think the Columbus region has made a lot of progress in terms of being on the radar nationally. We have a huge concentration of millennials, maybe one of the only places east of the Mississippi with the kind of concentration we have of the workers that people are looking for. I don't know exactly what the numbers are going to turn out being this year, but we were adding 40 to 50,000 people each year leading up to the pandemic. We're doing some analysis of our own and working with MORPC and stuff. We think that might be equal or maybe even greater at this point with all of the people that have moved to our region. So we're definitely a fast-growing region, and we're on their radar screen. That's why we're getting the RFPs, and that's why we're getting these, turns at bat. And I think your reputation is fine, but as you know, it's a never-ending battle, right? That's why I'm speaking so much about the economy's changing under our feet, and what we wanted 2 years ago, we got to keep pace with that. And I think the thing that enhances reputation more than anything is asking and inviting private sector to be a partner constantly, and saying, how can we serve, and vice versa, what do you need from them? And as long as you're doing that a lot, I think that relationship remains really good. We never hesitate, obviously, to bring anyone to Delaware County. We know how it's going to be approached. We have certainty of, speed and the certainty of how you do your business. And the county team does a great job. So it's just a matter of us keeping our head above water with all the growth that we have going on.
3637 is an area that I think at one time we thought would be ideal for office space, et cetera. But with the virus, and there's a lot of vacant property in the Dublins and the Columbuses, et cetera, do we need to kind of reevaluate what that makeup should be, or do you think that's going to be a short-term problem?
I think I'll just address the office situation. We've talked about, I think we've had about 185 business interviews here this first 100 days of the year. Just our team speaking to companies. We have many office users as part of that. And they're small, medium, large employers. And it's, again, going to remain very dynamic, but they're falling into three camps. There's very, very few companies saying they're going to be absolutely remote. Right? And there's some who are saying we're not coming back to an office and we don't need to sign a lease and we're out of here. There's an equal number that says you absolutely have to be here, that are pure office users, right? You absolutely have to be in this office to work for us. That's a minority of 95% of the companies are somewhere in the middle there. And it remains to be seen if that's going to be 70% are back in the office, 80%, 90%. I do know that it's not going to be 100% of what we used to think about. And that causes us to think about, again, how we tax in Ohio and things like that is going to come, it's going to come up as part of that conversation. If you have quality office space, it's probably going to be occupied, meaning the best space will be occupied. There'll be a flight to quality. The spaces that are really challenged, that don't have parking, that are, in great need of rehab and stuff like that, may suffer. So we're paying really close attention and talking to our real estate partners around the region about this. But I think we're gonna actually have some healthy markets. And I actually think some of the suburban markets and small town markets we have could thrive. Just as we were talking with Sunbury last week about, I think this could be a time when there could be great opportunity for small towns. And again, one of the reasons I stopped at Cohatch this morning, I think there's only a few unoccupied offices in there. I mean, that's actually kind of a data point for me, is to kind of sniff through that and say, how does that look? And that's actually really good news for everybody.
Mr. Farmer, do you have any questions?
No, I think that Delaware County is going to be in a unique position with that, because I think we probably have a lot of those residents that have been working from home, working in their home offices, and probably like that and be a hybrid. And I think that taxing issues in the future will be something that would come front and center with our residents. For every person that works downtown, they're happy that not every other person has been driving downtown with them. Right. And every person that has been working home is happy that they don't have to drive downtown every time. So I think when you look at the region, and things in Columbus have been fantastic, and I know we probably come to the front of the plate on housing, schools, and when employers are looking for a professional workforce. We just have this desire to balance our economy with getting some business. Where do you see our opportunities? You're selling the entire region, and right. Obviously Delaware County, we're a player on your team, so to speak. So where do you see us as our opportunities and in the future?
You have a huge opportunity to have that balance, which is hard to do. Residential living, people are able to work from home. A good amount of office activity, and new builds, and you have an industrial sector and even agricultural sector, right? I do think things like our, connecting Union County to 71 through Delaware County, opening up horizontal traffic, if you will, is going to be a really key piece of infrastructure to allow that balance to actually develop, so that it isn't all north and south back into Columbus, because I think there's a huge amount of opportunity across the northern part of this region, and you sit right in the middle of it and can benefit from almost all of it. Not every county has that opportunity, and it's just a matter of the infrastructure, careful planning, and I will applaud the time you spent to do your zoning work and your land use planning. I had a few counties that are now fast growing, that are maybe 10 years behind Delaware County in terms of that growth, but they're fast growing, and they don't have that done. And I've used your name in terms of, I think you need to go talk to Delaware County about the journey they've been on the last decade. And that's again, we don't want anyone to live in a vacuum here and learn from each other constantly. So my not only my expectations are pretty high for Delaware County, for business as well as tax revenue and everything else.
Just the final thing, I think the county, when you look at the Finance Authority, Economic Development, Commissioner's Office, we've really, it's challenging, because when you deal with residential development, it's a totally different mindset on infrastructure. You want them to pay their way, and to switch and be on the, build it and they'll come for commercial and industrial, which is what you're seeing probably to be successful in those areas. That's been I think a journey for us here at the county, and I think we're getting much better at that. Particularly with the Finance Authority and how they're able to help the economic development. But do you see any suggestions? The American Rescue Plan, that was interesting. You talked about that, because you could almost see that being dollars that could help get some job-ready sites in some very strategic areas. Now, depending on the guidance, we haven't seen the official guidance yet. So. That's
kind of the elephant in the room. I think there's going to be a lot of attention on it, obviously. what is, Delaware County is now maybe over 180,000 people as we,
About 220.
Yeah, 215.
wow. So, I mean, I was looking at something dated this morning maybe then, because what I was gonna say is it does require staff and literally people to do this work too, right? So, you know, we're fast growing, we have lots of needs, and having people that businesses and developers and stuff can interface with is really important. So the infrastructure you're building to actually handle that is actually pretty important. To have enough people to actually just have that, you know, to work things through from a speed standpoint, and then having good professionals that can help people, that really ups the game a lot. And I don't think we have the luxury of holding that back anymore. We really need more of that, even across our entire region.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate any insight you can provide, as are sometimes people that are a little bit more on the outside can see the journey as it unfolds and provide.
I have more questions than he does, if you want. I have a longer list.
Commissioner, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I do have one additional question it's kind of a narrow focus, but before I did that, I wanted to just recognize all the people in the room. You know, the growth and the policies and the planning that we've incorporated into our future don't happen easily, and there's a lot of people that have put a lot of hours into building the foundation for the economic growth that we envision. Our economic development team is phenomenal. They've done great work. The Finance Authority has been a real leader. Our business community has been leaders. We've got a new treasurer, Ranky, who's got a bunch of good ideas. I mean, there's a whole bunch of really good people that are stepping up behind the scenes, building the foundation to provide that for future work. So I want to publicly acknowledge them and thank them for their just huge roles. But a question is kind of a different sort of question, and that is, we have an airport in Delaware City that is a really nice airport. You know, it's got over a mile runway, and it's got hangar space that's fully occupied and so on. What can we do to make that an attractive, or how can we leverage that? We've built a really nice airport, but it's not really fully developed. I'm curious of your thoughts.
I'm no expert. I will say that Jobs Ohio's got Terry Slabaugh, who used to run the Dayton Airport and I think the Rochester Airport stuff, an airport guy, right? A real expert, is sitting at Jobs Ohio now and is a real asset as we talk about our assets across the region. Obviously, we've got airports in almost every county at some level, but it's a super question because we actually have lots of activity. And it's both corporate that wants to be close to an asset like that. For, you know, corporate travel has actually increased a lot during this pandemic. Not sure that'll continue on the same path, but it's actually increased quite a bit. And then two, we continue to have a lot of opportunities in aviation and aerospace that need some of those assets. And some of them are in, you know, smaller corporate type of facilities. NetJets is headquartered in our region and stuff like that. Good people to talk to about it. Terry's a super person that we could pull in for that conversation.
Great, thank you.
I just make some closing comments, and I want to reiterate, first of all, what Commissioner Benton said. I had notes to do exactly what you did.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate in our county. We have a lot of people that are really trying to work hard to make this county all it can be, to coin a phrase. It's a unique county in a lot of respects. I do think we get taken for granted sometimes, for a lot of reasons, I think. Rooftops in our county aren't an issue. Retailing really isn't an issue, but we really are trying to work to develop the job, create jobs in our county, and our partnership with you is very important in that. I can't say enough about the Finance Authority and the work they do. And Mr. Bishop, I think you're president. I don't know if you have any questions you'd like to ask. When I get through here, I'll give you an opportunity to think about that. Electeds, I think we have really a great group of electeds and represented by our treasurer with us today. And but we really have a great group trying to do good things in our county. A little selfish, but I think the commissioners are working very hard to do that as well. And in economic development, we're very proud of that group, and I think they do good work. And together, I think we make a pretty darn good team. But we're not happy where we are. We want to get to that next level, and working with you and your group is going to be very important in that. Mr. Bishop, do you have a question you would like to ask?
I'm sorry?
You have a question you want to ask, or?
Actually, I was fortunate enough to steal Mr. McDonald's time before the meeting here. So I will defer to staff if they have any questions or any other board member.
I just have to ask, I've been involved with the
You can
chamber.
probably,
Yeah.
Scott's probably need to come up to the microphone
Right.
so you can be heard. Introduce yourself.
Scott Coverly, do I have to give an address or anything? We're good? It seems like the training of workforce has been such an issue for so long. Is there anything else that we can do? I know we've got a career center that's doing great work. We've got jobs and family services doing great work, but is there anything else that we can do to bring the workforce in play here so that we can really attract economic development here?
Yeah.
It's a great question. I don't know if I have a good answer. To me, I keep saying labor force participation. And that means we used to have about 68% of our region's workforce participating in the workforce. That went through the pandemic, that slipped way down in the, maybe even below 60. And we were always higher than the rest of the country, by the way. The country's average was like 63, and we were at like 68. But 68 isn't a great number, right? So that means that we have a lot of people that are outside of the workforce. That means that they're not actively participating and trying to get that full-time job. And that's why, again, I'm no housing or transportation expert, but those top the list in terms of obstacles. Daycare is probably right there with them, right? Especially these days. Like, how do we get daycare closer, things like that. Even CODA is talking about daycare as like a wraparound solution around, where the bus stops, there's daycare and things like that. I think we're gonna have to be more creative than we have in 50 years to get that labor force participation rate. If we can get that over 70%, we probably don't have so many help wanted signs, right? It's awesome to have these opportunities, but it's kind of gut-wrenching when we're not able to fulfill them. I mean, there's tens of thousands of full-time jobs with benefits at very high wages across Ohio. A good portion of them are in our region. And so my final statement is, I'm not in favor of more programs. We have a lot of programs. And maybe even one of the issues that if I'm a person looking for a job, it can be very confusing. If I'm a business trying to figure out the myriad of programs that I can tap into, it's probably equally confusing. For everybody here, I know they do a lot of dot connecting. This is an area where we have to double down on that dot connecting and just connect people that want to work, get more people into that system, and then help our businesses just find them. And our team is doing that every day, but it's one at a time and two at a time and stuff. It's just, we got to make it easier to connect these people that want to work with full-time jobs and the companies that want to employ them. We got unbelievable opportunities here. So that's my frustration a little bit, and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer to it, but I don't know if there is one.
Are there any other questions, anyone?
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Bob Lamb, Economic Development Director. Kenny, you've been fortunate to work throughout the country in various different roles, and here in the county, we've been able to, through the elected leaders of the community and the appointed leaders, form different partnerships that encompass nonprofit, the Port Authority, and the county working together. How do you see that we should position ourselves to best leverage those resources and open up new doors?
Well, I think you may even answered your own question. Partnering first. That's like the mantra of economic development. Should be the mantra of any economic development organization. Who do I partner with? And then if I can't partner, I might have to default to at least starting it myself. But you can't have a strong enough and a big enough coalition of people that are working. And you got an awesome one, as you said. But keep expanding it. It's not the county's job or the economic development team's job to try to grow the economy, it's in everybody's interest, right? And so elicit and ask everybody to be at the table. Those places that actually are bringing the academic sector, private sector, public sector together consistently win. It brings more diversity to the table, more difference of opinions, more networks. Those that go it alone might get one thing done, but they'll probably fail at the next 9 things. And so I just can't, whether that's in your own county, or it's across our region, or it's a statewide coalition. We're part of national coalitions and Midwest coalitions, and sometimes I think the collaboration is, killing me, but it always pays off. And the Secretary of Commerce said it last week. Some of the big ideas that they're going to elicit as part of the infrastructure plan and stuff, she was very clear. Don't bring it to me unless it's part of a coalition. I want to see CEOs' signatures in the appendices, and I want to see multiple local governments, and I want to see academic partners saying, we're all at the table and this is a priority, and we can, we're going to invest in ourselves, and we're going to ask others to invest with us in Washington and Columbus and all these neighbors. And so partner, because none of us have enough resources to move the kinds of big things that we got to get done in this region forward without doing that. A lot of zeros with those transportation and housing numbers and stuff.
As a county, I think we have a little more of a challenge, but also the opportunity, because it's made up of 18 townships and cities and villages and stuff, and everybody has a little bit of a different interest. But I think that can also be our strength. But it does require a lot of coordination and communication and understanding as we try to work together, so that we are partnering, to use a phrase you used a while ago, and going alone doesn't get us anywhere. We all have to work together to accomplish that. I think we're trying very hard, but this county has a lot to offer, and we really appreciate you taking the time today to be with us. One last chance. Does anyone else have a question? With that, I believe anything you want to say in closing, or you?
Thank you, now's our time. This is an unprecedented opportunity for us to separate from the field of our competitors nationally, it's a competitive world. Now's the time to use the balance sheet if you have it, and there's lots to invest in, but we're in a good position to do that, and there's not going to be a better time or a cheaper time to invest in some of the things we discussed today. So just to encourage you to do that, and the mechanism that you're setting up is actually very forward thinking, and it's great timing to use it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bob, do you have the last comment before?
Just wanted to thank everybody for coming today. Really appreciate the time and the discussion. If you do have the availability, we have food just down the hall available to continue the conversation as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. If there's no other business to bring before us this morning, we are in recess until 1:30. She gave me the stare like she thought I was going to close the meeting. I can see that in your face. We're in recess until 1:30.